Welcome to Sunday Night Live, Sunday Night Prime, because I'm half alive, and I'm always delighted to see you and to know that you are our audience here. And I'm so pleased that we get so much mail and phone calls and things, not only from Catholics, but Protestant, Orthodox, Jewish friends. I'm still waiting for a Muslim to call me up. And we have a guest here tonight. I want to brighten things up a little bit here in the summer. So you may have heard of him. He's an old friend of mine, the Archbishop of New York.
Father Benedict, a joy to be with you. You look alive to me, thank God.
And as I said to you, he's kind of bashful.
Yeah, well, I hope I don't get tongue-tied.
You grew up in right outside of St. Louis, didn't you?
Well, some people say I've never grown up, but yes, I was. I was right in Baldwin, Missouri, which is a suburb. Now it's considered a suburb of St. Louis, Father Benedict. At the time, it was kind of a little country town. Yeah. My folks moved out there with the great rush to the suburbs with the GI loan and everything when I was 4 years old.
And your mom is still there? Right?
Mom is still there, thank God. I was just with her, had a week's vacation with her. Yes, she's doing well, thanks be to God.
And your brothers and sisters?
My brothers and sisters are there. In fact, this summer, we've got 3 of my beautiful nieces are getting married.
Oh, my God.
Erin and Kelly and Megan. They're all, and I got them. I had one in July. I got one this August, and I got one Labor Day weekend.
So you had a nice offering for each wedding.
I give them discounts, but
give them discounts. Well, isn't that wonderful? You have 3.
I am delighted. I got 12 nieces and 1 nephew. My nephew is Patrick. He's only 4 years old. He's a priest. I ordained him a priest right after I baptized him. He doesn't know yet, but I think that's valid, don't you think? So.
Well, we have a very serious subject tonight, and if we can get through it, we may get a few other issues that will be of interest. But right now, the hot question, the hot issue, is same-sex marriage. And sad to say, the newspapers, especially the New York Times, is just celebrating this on the front page of the Times, and communicating to people that this is not only okay, but wonderful.
Virtuous almost.
And you know, on the one side, I have a compassion for people who are homosexual, but at this point, celebrating an abuse of a marriage, of the sacrament, it's a very bad idea.
You're on target as usual, Father Benedict, and what we've tried to say, and my Lord, I don't know how more clearly we could have stated it, that our campaign, which I'm so grateful to the Catholic community of the state of New York. You know, I was told by even our enemies, who told me this with some grudging respect, that they got 44,000 letters from Catholics protesting this. Protesting this, and this is superb. That's a lot, even for New York. So the Catholic opposition, even though it's not just a Catholic cause, but the Catholic opposition was strong and vigorous. We lost, we're bruised, we're bloodied, we're disappointed, we're saddened. But boy, I think the Catholic people can hold their heads high that we tried our best, and there wasn't anybody in the state of New York that didn't know where the church stood.
Yeah.
But Father, what I think we were vigorous in trying to show that there was nothing anti-gay about this at all. We're talking about pro-marriage. You know, you go back farther than I do, pardon me for reminding you, but the Catholic Church has always been opposed to anything that would dilute marriage. That might be divorce, all right? That might be living together before marriage. That might be contraception. That might be infidelity, adultery, fornication. You name it, anything that cheapens or dilutes marriage, we've been against. This is but another thing that what you might call abuses what marriage is about. Now, this does have huge religious overtones, but it's not just a religious issue. We're talking about an issue of civilization, are we not? This definition of marriage, that it's one man, one woman, together for one life, in love and fidelity, please God, bringing about children, this definition antedates history. This definition antedates politics. This definition antedates Abraham. This definition antedates Jesus. So it's not just religion was only validating and affirming what the good God has implanted in the human heart, this definition of marriage. We were simply against saying nobody, nowhere, no time has the right to tamper with the definition of marriage. As you just hinted at, Father Benedict, we're not saying that we were going to be stoning to death homosexuals who choose to live together. We would even, I think a case could be made, the church has been known to defend the rights of homosexuals.
Yes, that's
Every
right.
single person is created in God's image and likeness. One's sexual attraction does not take away from the dignity and respect that a child of God deserves. So in fact, Father Benedict, I don't know if you remember, when this was in the heat of the debate, there was this tearful article about a homosexual couple, and the one partner was going to be sent back to his country because he was an illegal immigrant. And so this other man said, see, this is why we need to be married, so that I can protect my partner here. I wrote him and said, we'll help you lobby to change the law. We're on the forefront of immigration reform. We'll help you lobby to change the law to protect illegal immigrants. We don't want to change marriage to accommodate that. That's sort of a drastic approach, isn't it? So it's not a question of civil rights. It's not a question of being anti-gay. It's simply a question of protecting what is one of the most elemental building blocks in civilization and the common good. You've brought this up on your show many times. It has been shown, even by scholars at Harvard University, which is hardly the bastion of classical traditional thought, that one of the things that most causes poverty, violence, drugs in society is what? The decimation of the family. Yes. When a child doesn't grow up in a loving, united father and mother, there's going to be repercussions for the common good. If the state wanted to promote the common good, it should be strengthening marriage, the traditional definition, not whittling away. You brought it up before, Father Benedict, and when we said this in the arguments, they laughed at us and said, oh, you're alarmist, you're chicken littles. We said, okay, Bishop DiMarzio said it, Bishop Murphy, my brother bishops, I said it. You attempt to redefine marriage as between two men or two women. Next, you're going to say that marriage can be polygamous. Right. In other words, that you don't have to have one man and one woman, or one man and one man, and one woman or one woman, or that fidelity is not important, that you can take that away from marriage. They said, oh, that'll never happen, you're an alarmist. A week afterwards, Father Benedict, on the cover of your favorite newspaper, the article saying, fidelity's passé. That as a matter of fact, these days, it's so tough, marriage, that both the spouses have to have an agreement that infidelity is acceptable. And now, what's happening? Now with this polygamy. Now that they're saying, who cares? Why does the definition of marriage have to be 1 and 1? Let's have 1 and 3. So we're not alarmists on this. It was, you go back to the Roe v. Wade, the early battles. Remember after the Roe v. Wade, pro-lifers like yourself said, before long there'll be infanticide. And they laughed at you. Yeah. And of course now we got it.
Now we got it.
All right? So, you find yourself They say, boy, you in the church are these hand-wringing naysayers, dramatic crepe hangers. Well, we're not. The Holy Mother Church has been around for a long time. She's a shrewd, seasoned mother. And she's simply worried about the happiness. Like you just said, I want people with same-sex attractions to be happy. I want them to be happy. I happen to believe that, as with anybody, the only way you can be truly happy is to conform your life to God's will. And this ain't it, okay? But so, I don't know, we got a big challenge on our hand, Father. And the other thing, if you want to start talking about, is now the corollary problems with religious freedom, right?
Yeah, well, of course.
You know that. We're saying, okay, now what? I mean, we've been told by wonderful, faithful attorneys, be ready. You will have now, they will bait you to come in and say, we want you to marry us. We want to rent your hall.
Yeah.
And if we don't, again, they say, oh, come on now, that can't happen. Happened in New Jersey.
Yes.
Happened in Canada. Happened in England.
Yes.
Now you've got a father and mother in England. You saw the famous story, a man and woman who were married beautifully, traditionally, unable to have children. They went to adopt. And because they believed that adoption should not be given to same-sex couples, they've been thrown out. They said, no, you can't, unless you agree with this. This is now going to lead, I'm afraid, to a violation of religious freedom.
It's also interesting, Archbishop, at my old age, I've always studied the psychology of history. You know, history doesn't just happen. It has all kinds of psychological things behind him, things like the rise of the Nazis or paranoia. And one of the interesting things may be that there will be a powerful counter-reaction. That you could tell me in 25 or 50 years that the United States would be moving into being puritanistic.
Could be.
Puritanical.
Because it's that cyclical thing.
Yes.
That pendulum.
Yeah.
Well, is that not true, Father Benedict, with the pro-life movement? If you remember the morning after Roe v. Wade, so let's go back to January 23rd, 1973, the prediction was to the Catholic Church, give up. Abortion is over and done with. The only ones against abortion are the old-time old folks. Young people are going to be for it overwhelmingly. Move on. Don't fight it. It's a losing battle. Are you kidding? Today it remains the premier civil rights issue in American society.
It cost many a politician his job.
And is a volcanic issue to this day, and we're winning.
Yes.
All right? So I think you may be onto something. A quarter century from now, 40 years from now, I think the pendulum will go back.
Particularly if there was an economic collapse or a war. Because the human race starts to take things seriously after there's trouble.
We learned that from the people of Israel, don't we?
Yes.
Prosperity and peace are never too good for religion. They get sloppy.
And you know, also, there is the fascinating question that comes up when a civilization is rotting away. There may be a reaction to the other side. So, for instance, when the English society fell apart in the 17th and 18th century, you had the Puritans.
Sure.
Came over here.
Sure.
Started New England.
Now, what we have to say, though, we can't take kind of cozy comfort from that, because the reason, for instance, the pro-life pendulum is swinging on the side of right is because we fought hard. Yeah. And we got to do that with marriage. We cannot give up. We cannot give up. And this is a double whammy for New York, because not only have we lost it, but now they're saying, oh, good. Now the tsunami effect will take I don't believe that. My brother bishops with whom I've been in touch have said to me, we hate to see New York go, but actually that we're doubling our effort, and our people don't follow New York. In fact, sometimes they like to do what's against what New York and California are doing. So God willing, this is going to be a spark plug for the rest of the country, you think, to redouble their efforts. I'm hoping anyway.
It'll be interesting to sit around and watch Unfortunately, I'm 78, so I may have to watch from purgatory. Some people don't believe in purgatory, but I'm from Jersey City. I believe in purgatory.
I believe in purgatory too. I've watched your show.
Oh, we have a break now. Okay. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Well, we're having a kind of quiet.
What's your idea, Father Benedict? I'm saying too. Not only am I'm upset and disappointed, and even rethinking, my Lord, is there something more we could have done with this whole decision, with the legislature presuming, tragically, to redefine marriage? But what doubles my chagrin here in New York, 30 states have taken this to the people. Should we redefine marriage to include same-sex? And 30 states have said resoundingly, absolutely not. Even California. All right?
Even California.
Here, we didn't get that chance, which deepens my disappointment on this, because I'm convinced, it would have been a tough battle, but I'm convinced that we could have defeated it. Now, I think, though, Father Benedict, you and I, as priests, as pastors, we also got to be honest. We've got to sail with our own people too.
Yes.
Because I hate to admit it, but darn it, let's be realistic. There's a good chunk of our Catholic people that do not agree with this and say, oh, good, we think there should be same-sex marriage. I'm convinced, and reporters have asked me that at St. Patrick. They've said, well, we hear your Catholic people are for it. I said, well, that depends on the way you phrase the question. I've seen some parsing of this. When you have a pollster say, do you believe that couples, because of their sexual orientation, should be deprived of their civil rights to enter into a legal bond of marriage? They might be tempted to say, I don't agree with, I'm for their civil rights.
Yeah.
If you bluntly say, do you believe marriage should be redefined to accommodate same-sex couples, they will say no. No, we don't. So a lot of it depends on the shrewdness of the person asking the question. But I still believe we got our work cut out for us, don't you? How do you answer, Father? But let's say our high school teachers watching us out there in our CCD, our religious ed, or our Catholic high schools, who say, what do I say to my kids? Who say, but why should we care? Isn't it discriminatory just because somebody has a same-sex attraction that they can't enjoy marriage? How do we say this isn't a civil rights issue?
Well, I think the first place you have to begin is the natural law. If you swim against the tide, it will destroy you. This is not from the Bible. This is from the Greeks, the philosophers.
Sure.
If you go against...
It didn't take Moses to tell us
No,
this,
it didn't take Moses to tell him. He did.
Yeah.
But
and he didn't make it up.
Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. Yeah. And so it was a mess all along the way. And it will go on till the end of the world. People will kid themselves along about what is wrong and right. Take a terrible example in modern times with Hitler and the Nazis, with violating the worst violation of
natural law, civil rights,
killing people, killing the Holocaust. Is
there a right? Does everybody have a right to marriage? I don't think so, do they? Theologically, would we say that? You have a right if you have what it takes.
Yeah, if you have the takes.
Not every urge, not every desire is a right, is it?
No.
I mean, I have an urge to play third base for the Yankees, but I don't have a right to do that, do I? Because I don't have I don't have what it takes. So does everybody have a right to marriage? I don't think so. A married person doesn't have right to enter into another marriage.
That's right.
Okay. A husband who is on a business trip that may fall in love with another woman doesn't have the right to marry her, right? So marriage isn't a right. Marriage is defined by certain conditions and qualifications, correct?
Yes.
So I guess what the church is saying, and here's Father Benedict where I think we've got our pastoral challenge. Not every urge is a right. Not every desire is a right. The only people who have a right to marriage are those who meet the qualifications,
Right.
namely
That's right.
the ability to create a climate where new life is brought into the world, namely through children, correct?
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, then you can't enter into marriage.
Do you have a right to be a professor in a university?
Not unless you got what it takes.
Not unless we just-
Do you have a right to pass a course? No, not or to get a degree. Not unless
You have a right to be a clergyman.
Now here's what we're saying, Father Benedict, and here's I think that where the problem is. They say, well then, then what you're saying is if you have a faithful Catholic with the same-sex attraction, and if the only way in Catholic, the Catholic understanding that one can enjoy sexual love is between a man and woman in the lifelong, life-giving, faithful, loving commitment of marriage. Ergo, a person with the same-sex attraction has to live a chaste life.
That's right.
We're saying that,
A
aren't
celibate
we?
life.
We're saying that, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but we say that to everybody, don't we? We say that to
A widow, a widower.
I used to bring Holy Communion to a wonderfully robust, handsome man in his mid-30s whose wife was crippled with rheumatoid arthritis. He could never have sexual relations with her ever because of her condition. He loved her as tenderly as I've ever seen. He doesn't have the right to sexual enjoyment elsewhere, does he?
No.
No. It's so, but this is a tough one to explain, isn't it? Because we're in a rights and an entitlement culture, aren't we? Where people are entitled to enjoy anything they want, to any privilege they want. Don't you think? Is that part of the problem?
The foundation of the American society was that this is under God. Mm-hmm. But it lost.
It lost it.
It became secularized.
And who was so eloquent? John Paul II used to say, legitimate, genuine freedom is not the right to do whatever you want, but the right to do what you ought. And that's a classical, natural law, American belief.
Yes.
That rights are best exercised when they are under the control of the common good. Okay? But that's a tough one today, isn't it?
Well, you see in the United States, the most dangerous and dark moment in the history of our country was slavery. Mm-hmm. Absolutely contrary to the divine law. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the slavery that existed in the United States was the worst form of slavery. In Greece, they had philosophers who were slaves in a certain sense. They belonged to a family, say. Mm-hmm. But in this country, a slave was not a person. And it brought to the United States its own destruction.
Yeah.
And it was a great people, particularly the abolitionists, and also by Lincoln, and to take up the issue. Mm-hmm. And many people did not see that slavery was absolutely wrong. But they now, would anybody in the United States...
Now we know it's intrinsically evil.
Would anybody ever
No.
think about
No.
it?
Does it bother you? Another thing that I worry, because we're always as Catholics saying, wait a minute, it's just like the abortion issue. This isn't a Catholic issue. We're talking about a human rights issue. We're talking about something that flows from the proposition that made this country the great one that it is, the right to life. Is not something that, and boy, did I get a lot of criticism for this one. But the other thing that disturbed me about this whole battle was, to me it seems terribly un-American for the government to presume to redefine a given. America is at her best when there's not much government. We were founded to say government control is minimal. There are countries where you expect the government to butt in and define family size, jobs, who gets a house, what a family is, what marriage is, who can live and who can die. We got them on the face of the earth today. China, North Korea. America never goes that way. But now we got the government saying, we'll decide who gets married. We'll decide what's a valid marriage. We'll decide what rights people have. I thought America was at her best when we recognized the rules and the rights that God had implanted in the human drama.
Well, the founders of the Republic did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, we're founded on that certain inalienable rights. Inalienable means they're there; they're not given by the government. This bothers me, and boy, I got a lot of heat when I mentioned in an article that a redefinition of marriage might be palatable in North Korea or China, but please, not here in the state of New York. Government should. I mean. We can't even get them to balance our budget. Now they're going to redefine marriage. This is not, I don't think this is what the American proposition intended government to be.
By the way, due respect for China and Korea, they wouldn't redefine the family.
They wouldn't do it this way anyway. Yeah,
they wouldn't touch it.
No. I don't know. This is interesting, Father Benedict, too. Who's in the leadership here? Our African Americans and our Latinos are strongly pro-family. And they were very, very much against the redefinition of marriage. The move to redefine marriage was pretty much of a chic white cause among wealthy people.
Sophisticated.
Yeah, it wouldn't go over well. It doesn't go over well in the black churches. It doesn't go over well in the Latino churches. When when a reporter said to me, well, there's a lot of celebration today now over the gay marriage thing, I said, if you go to a barbecue in the Bronx or go out to Staten Island to a family picnic, I don't think you're going to find much celebration. I don't think this is a grassroots movement. No. Who knows? I don't know. But we can't give up. And you and I have talked about this before when you've been kind enough to invite me on the show. We got a big problem within our Catholic family over a resurrection of the sacrament of marriage. You've heard of the sacrament of matrimony. We got a big vocation crisis in marriage. The Pew Center tells us only 50% of Catholic young people are getting married. Now they're living together. They might marry outside the church. They're not approaching the sacrament of marriage. That, Father Benedict, is a biggie. You've heard me say that's the greatest vocation crisis in the church today. Not the priesthood, not consecrated life, because if we had an abundance of vocations to lifelong, life-giving, faithful, loving sacramental marriage, we'd have all the vocations to the priesthood and religious life that we need. So we can't just sit here and say, oh, how bad this all is. We've got to reclaim the primacy of the sacrament of matrimony, don't you think?
But you know who's going to do it for us? It's going to happen. One person's going to be able to do it.
Tell me.
God.
There you go. Sure.
A catastrophe. A world economic collapse, as we had in 1929. A war.
Now, were you that religious leader that predicted the end of the world a month or so?
No.
I didn't know if that was you.
No, that guy. Well, my response to him is promises, always promises. You know, I mean, we're hoping.
My grandpa once said, if the world is going to end, I hope it ends before income tax day, because I just,
But if you think of the number of people who do not take seriously why we are here, and we're all going to the same place, to the divine judgment.
To our true home.
We're all going there, and we're going before God. And unfortunately, even among Christian people, there seems to be a bit of a loss of the last judgment.
Oh, I think you're right.
You know, you don't have to be frightened to death.
Some people say, oh, we got to get out of this fear thing with sin and damnation in the last judgment. I said, we might get out of fear. We can't get out of honesty. And that's what's going to happen. So
we have a break now.
Oh, good.
I'm
so thirsty. Did you get that pizza coming in? Good.
Yes.
All right.
I have to put up with this, folks. I want you to know. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Well, Archbishop, as we're coming to our last part here, and it gives an opportunity to give you an opportunity to talk about a number of issues right now before the hierarchy and before the church. We were talking years ago, 50 years ago, cardinals and bishops kind of stood above all of this. And it was not pride, but it was thought to be proper for a bishop not to get into the fight.
The hurly-burly.
The priests did, but bishops did not. And then around the coming of Cardinal Cook, who was a social worker, he directly got into some arguments with politics and people like that, or positive teachings, and gradually Catholic people have become familiar with bishops, hierarchs, expressing very strong points of view, and they may even disagree.
Yes.
Now, of course, I know that you're bashful. Your mother said that to me.
Yeah. You better hold up some cue cards here, Father Benedict. I won't know what to say. You're right. And let's face it, too, part of the reason, Father Benedict, that maybe bishops' hierarchy have been somewhat, we're talking about, say, beyond 40 years ago, were somewhat reticent, is also because we were a very distinct, often despised minority in an overwhelmingly Protestant culture that was paranoid about Catholic power. So our bishops were sort of had some duct tape on. That has changed, and I think good. Here's a challenge we got, Father Benedict, and I hope your listeners could nod in agreement to this. We bishops are constantly told to stay out of politics. I'm sorry, but marriage isn't politics. The life of the baby in the womb is not politics. The rights of the immigrant is not politics, right? Issues of poverty are not politics. They have political dimension, but they're basically moral issues, are they not? Are they not? Whenever the Blessed Pope John Paul II always said that the Church is an expert when it comes to the protection of human life and the dignity of the human person. Whenever that's threatened, whenever that's called into question, the Church always must stand up. He said that on the Mall in Washington. Remember, in October of 1979, you were probably there taking up the collection. He said that the Church must speak up. And darn it, this isn't politics, is it?
No.
So we bishops aren't I get it on this. You bishops stay out of politics. Now, that always depends on the issue. So liberal Catholics want us to stay out of politics when it's, say, pro-life or pro-marriage. Conservative Catholics want us to stay out of politics when it might be immigration, war and peace, our social, our economic issues. And darn it, we stay out of politics. I'm not a politician. I don't know all this stuff. But I am a pastor. I am a teacher, and I have a sacred responsibility to preach the truth. I hope lovingly. And the salvation of my soul is going to depend on that if I don't do that.
It's interesting. The hot issue right now for the clergy and people being critical of the clergy is the immigration.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And once again, Archbishop Gomez, the Archbishop of Los Angeles, he and I are working now on an article that we want to put out. We thought, well, the two large, the one on either side, huge amounts of immigrants in both. He's from Mexico. He's an American citizen, but he was born in Mexico, Archbishop Gomez. We want to say something, and more or less, Father Benedict, what we're saying is, look, we're not politicians here. We don't know the real ins and outs of the law. All we know is that there are some basic principles that should always be respected. Families should stay together, okay? People should be treated fairly. A country has a right to protect its borders. That's another one. That's an issue that sometimes even the pro-immigrants forget. So there's basic principles that we need to stand up for. How those are protected, how those are legislated, I trust the politicians, don't you?
At times.
I'm praying for them, yeah. But that's not I can't balance my own checkbook, much less the national budget. I'm not an expert on that. I hope that we are somewhat would have an amount of credibility when it comes to speaking about the moral implications of these things.
It's interesting, though. You can take an issue and push behind it to the divine law. Mm-hmm. And take this issue with the immigration. Mm-hmm. Of course, a country should keep its borders.
Protect its borders.
Protects its citizens.
Yeah.
Even citizens who had come from other countries, or even people who are not members of the country, citizens, but they're legitimately here. Mm-hmm. But behind that is that the world does not belong to the United States or Russia. It belongs to God.
It belongs to God.
And human beings belong to God.
It's interesting. You know, a moral theologian whom I respect very much has told me that he thinks the virtue today that really has to be prominent is the virtue of stewardship. Now, usually when we say stewardship, we talk about money. And that is a very important part of it. But stewardship also means what you just spoke about. The earth, the planet, our bodies, our lives are given to us to care for. They're given to us almost on loan by God.
Yes.
And stewardship means that we care for them properly according to the way He intended. That's the virtue of stewardship. Now, that has a lot, what you just said. Basically, boundaries, the earth does not belong to politicians or to political boundaries. It belongs to God. And God wants His children to benefit from creation. You're right. When you go back to the divine foundation, that's where our moral principles derive from.
And let me take up an imaginary situation. Mm-hmm. There's a large island, several million people, and a natural disaster occurs. This island is a country, and there is a huge volcano, and everyone has to leave the island. Do they have rights to go any place they can go? Yes.
Sure they do.
They do.
Their rights don't depend on their citizenship.
No,
their rights don't depend on how
and
much
other
money
people
they
have to
duties.
Do that.
Yeah.
Now, I would say, in the Second World War, the United States, before the war and during the war, did open its gates to many people from Europe and Asia who came into this country and were integrated into the country. Mm-hmm. And it was a good thing.
Now, the caricature is that immigration is bad for economy and that high birth rate is bad for an economy. As you know, look at what's happening in Europe now. They don't have the people earning enough money to support what we'd call Social Security for the elderly. And we're going to get there too, right? Because the birth rate is so low. So here again, don't you have that certain things that we take for granted or that think is a religious thing is not. It's back to the divine, right? There's a certain natural understandable corollary to these things. So if you have a proper enlightened view on immigration, if you have a proper enlightened view on healthy birth rates, society is going to prosper, I think.
There was a horrible example in the Second World War. Right before the war, a ship with, I think, was 800 Jewish people from someplace in the Caribbean, I don't remember whether, and they came over to the United States. Where were they?
Were turned back? Is that what you?
And they were turned back all along, and they finally went to Europe, and they all perished. what an incredible thing.
Mm-hmm.
They came off the ship and they were imprisoned and killed.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that is a terrible violation against the natural law.
Yeah. You
The
bring up-
Nazis, of course, had the essential.
Oh yeah, they had the most diabolical
Yes,
against
that
it.
was
But you bring it up, and of course it's only going to become front burner again next year with election year. We bishops are going to be blasted from both sides, and I
Why
say
is that?
Well, once again, they think we're interfering in politics. We're not. I sometimes think, Father Benedict, you know me pretty well. People think, oh, these bishops are pugnacious, and one of your favorite columnists said that I'm very pugnacious, and we don't want to fight. I want to embrace. I want to shake hands. I don't want to fight. I'm not a cultural warrior. I don't relish these things. But every once in a while, your responsibility to be a teacher of moral precepts and to speak the truth with love, as John Paul the Great said, that demands that we speak up. We have to be prophetic. That's what the prophets of the Old Testament did, right? I'm not looking for battles. I'd like to work with the politicians and with the leaders of the state. But every once in a while, I think it's our responsibility to say, as the Italians would, basta, enough. This is going too far, and this is not good.
I'm hoping that the other religions in the United States will become more vocal.
Well,
the Orthodox Jews
are phenomenal. Our evangelical Christians,
yes.
The Mormons, oh my, sometimes they rival or put us to shame. And they have and why, Father Benedict, is this? Why, if you get a Reverend Jesse Jackson, a Reverend Martin Luther King, a Reverend Al Sharpton, why does nobody say, they're ministers, they're church people, they shouldn't interfere in politics? But if you have a bishop or a priest who dares to speak, not as a politician, but as a moral teacher, stay out of politics, why does that only apply to the Catholic Church? Can you answer me that?
Fascinating question.
But isn't that the truth? Why don't you ever see, what would happen, Father Benedict, if I asked one of the presidential candidates to preach from the pulpit of St. Patrick's Cathedral at Sunday Mass? I'd never do it.
Never do it.
And for good reasons. First of all, the people would walk out. They'd say this is highly appropriate. But let's say hypothetically that happened. You would be condemned by every editorial in every newspaper in this country.
Yeah.
It happens all the time in other churches. Our black churches have them all the time. Now, on the one hand, I admire them because their political skills are they're beautiful. They put us to shame with their vigorous participation in American democracy. But on the other hand, why does this so-called, this brickbat of separation of church and state only apply to Catholics?
It's an interesting question.
You know it? Why? But am I correct in asking that question or not?
It's the sophisticated, wealthy, upper middle class non-Catholics who have hostilities to the Catholic Church going way back in the 1930s and 40s. Their grandparents. During that time, there was a priest, Charles Coughlin.
Oh, well, I know,
Coughlin, and he got into politics.
Did he ever? Yeah, he ran a presidential candidate in 1936. Can you remember who it was?
Lemke.
William Lemke. You're one of the few people that knew that.
Yes.
Of course, you may have voted for him at your age.
But,
hey, I've gotten a few zingers in this program.
And that, I think, is still in people's back mind, that the Catholic priest ran for the church, and that wasn't the church.
Right, and he did run. He may have. He was born in Canada. That's why was he a Capuchin? No, he was a Basilian, wasn't he? Yeah, fascinating guy, Father Coughlin.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but it put the fire.
So you're thinking that because of that memory, because he was a radical figure, and in many ways an embarrassing figure. We have to say that when he became very intemperate, very fiery. So you're saying, that almost left a bad taste in people's mouths.
And the other thing is that Catholic higher education was very influential in the United States for good things.
Oh yeah, a good thing, yeah.
But it has lost.
But why, Father Benedict, let me bring it home a little bit. Why do some of our Catholic politicians, and Lord knows we got some great ones, but why do they almost feel obliged to say, the church has no impact on the way I vote? My religion is purely private and has no implications in my political life. Catholics feel obliged to say that, and of course the most colorful example of that was John F. Kennedy in September of 1960, when he had to go before the Ministerial Baptist Association in Dallas, Texas. And if you read that speech, now politically it was very shrewd. He couldn't have won without it, and I'm not doubting his sincerity, but what he felt obliged to say, don't worry about my religion, it will have no impact on the decisions I make. We would never expect that of a faithful Baptist. We'd never expect that of a faithful Jew.
What about a Mormon?
We'd never, well, now there I think we get a little sympathy. I don't like it. I bristle when I see what they've done in the past with a Romney or we got 3 Mormons now running, and sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, I don't think a Mormon could be a good president because they're too beholden to their religion," and I feel like saying, we've been through that before. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm for them as candidates. I want to remain neutral, but just from a religious point of view, we've been there before. You should not judge a person's. We felt the other end of that whip, and we think it's terribly unjust for you to. They're really giving him a religion test, which is opposed by the Bill of Rights.
I think behind that is that there is an authority in the Catholic Church. Everybody knows. And
True.
In the Mormons,
there is too. There's an identifiable personal authority.
Yes.
You're onto something there, and we'd be one of the few. One of the few faiths that would have that. That is something. And ours happens to be live in a foreign country, which has always led to the old canard that Catholics are subjects of a foreign potentate. So,
kind of ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but I guess that explains that animus that is part of the American DNA, I think might explain why there's such a suspicion of Catholic leaders when they say something publicly. But why, Father Benedict, did you see recently the governor of Illinois said that he would he would now commute any death sentence of a prisoner that comes up, that he would commute their death sentence to life imprisonment? Bravo, I say. Okay, well, good move. I know some of our listeners might disagree, but I'd say bravo. You know what he said? Why? Because I'm a Catholic, and I've thought deeply about this issue, and my church has spoken eloquently on this, and I'm not going to do it. Applauded by most of the press. Applauded.
They applauded him.
Yeah, said, wow, what an enlightened leader. What if a Catholic governor said, I can't allow abortions in this state? He would be condemned, there'd be recall, there'd be impeachment and everything. So a lot of times it depends on the issue, doesn't it? A lot of times it depends on the issue. Are you going to World Youth Day?
No, I'm too old.
You're over 35.
Yes.
Okay. Are the friars going?
Oh, about 18 of them.
I'll be leaving next week because it starts in Madrid. The Holy Father's coming. I think it's next week, isn't it? I forget when it is.
I don't fit into World Youth Day.
Well, you would be a great icon. I wish you were coming. You've been to them in the past, haven't you?
A relic, not an icon.
You've been to them in the past, haven't you?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Where did we go to the last one? It was Denver.
Well, the last one was Cologne, wasn't it? In Germany?
We had to go.
Was
we
that
had
it?
one in Denver, right?
No, the last one was in Australia. I don't know if you went or not. Right. We got about 400 kids from the Archdiocese of New York going. I'm taking my niece Caitlin. She's going. We're going to have a good time.
I can't believe that you'd be having a good time.
I will have a good time, I'll have you know, with the young people.
May I observe this, Your Excellency, that you seem to enjoy life.
Hey, look, I like being with young people. I like being with old people.
People too. I think we enjoy being a bishop.
I enjoy life, and I hope it shows.
Well, it does show. And I think for all of us, this is a very healthy thing.
I hope so.
Not just for
I like being on with you.
Now we have our 1-minute appeal to closing. Would you give us a little short prayer?
I'd be honored to. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of our faith. Thanks for the gift of our listeners, for their interest, their attention, their generosity that keeps us going. Thanks for the vocations you've given us all, especially the vocation to love and respect and defend the holy sacrament of matrimony. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
And I'm very, very grateful.
You'll invite me back, won't you?
I will invite you.
Do your ratings still go up? Or
Yes,
what?
yes.
Now, you got to come on my, Catholic satellite radio. And you've been on the show before. And you brought your Arthur Godfrey ukulele that one time. Remember, will you come back and sing?
I'll sing. But I have to say, though, that you do enjoy being a bishop.
I do enjoy being a bishop. I enjoy being a priest.
Yes.
I like being a kid or anything, yeah.
We have to just get on here. I have to say some money for EWTN. This week I visited Mother Angelica. I visited her, had a beautiful visit. Of course, she can't speak, and she's quite bound to bed. But I asked her, is she still praying for and would you believe it, as mother as she ill, in that situation, she's been praying, and the numbers of people watching EWTN doubled.
Goes up.
She's offering her sufferings for us, and please do pray for Mother Angelica. God bless.